The day everything changed. The morning my father called me a failure was the same morning I decided to prove him wrong. Not out of anger, not out of desperation, but out of something quieter, something colder, something that took 11 years to fully form. I remember every detail of that day. The weather was gray, the kind of gray that makes everything feel heavy before it even begins. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still in my work clothes from the night before, because I had been up until 3 in the morning, finishing a proposal for a client that my small consulting firm had been chasing for 6 months. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. But I had finished. And when I looked at those papers spread across that table, I felt something close to pride for the first time in a long time. Then my father walked in. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask if I had slept. He looked at the papers, looked at me, and said, and I will never forget these words for as long as I live. He said, "Still playing pretend, I see." I looked up at him. He poured himself a cup of coffee, leaned against the counter, and said something that I have carried in my chest like a stone every single day since. He said, "Maya, I love you. But you are not built for business. You never were. Some people are meant to work for other people, and that is not a bad thing. But continuing to waste your time on this dream, it is embarrassing. For you and for this family." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I folded my proposal neatly, put it in my bag, and walked out of that house. That was 11 years ago. And last week, my father stood on a sidewalk in downtown Chicago, staring up at a 40-story building with my name on it. Not a small plaque, not a logo in the corner. My full name, in steel letters, 4 feet tall, on the front of a building that I own. And I was standing right next to him. This is that story. A family that measured worth in dollars. To understand what happened that morning, and everything that came after, you need to understand the family I grew up in. My name is Maya Chen. I am the middle child of 3. My older brother Daniel was the golden child in every sense of the word. Tall, confident, the kind of person who walked into rooms like he already owned them. He went to a top business school, came out with an MBA, and immediately joined our father's commercial real estate company. My younger sister Lily was the baby. Sweet, quiet, and always somehow exempt from every expectation that was placed on me and Daniel. And then there was me, the middle one, the one who asked too many questions, the one who had ideas that nobody wanted to hear, the one who spent her teenage years reading business books instead of going to parties and was told, more than once, that she was too intense. My father, Robert Chen, was a self-made man. He had built a real estate business from nothing, starting with one small property in his 30s and growing it into a company that managed over 40 commercial buildings across Illinois by the time I was a teenager. He was proud of that. Deeply, deeply proud. And in many ways, rightfully so. But with that pride came a very specific idea of what success looked like. It looked like him. It looked like Daniel. It did not look like me. See, I didn't want to go into real estate. I had spent years watching my father's company, and I saw every inefficiency, every missed opportunity, every moment where old thinking was costing the business real money. And when I brought those ideas to my father, when I sat across from him at dinner and said, "Dad, I've been thinking about the way we manage our commercial tenants, and I think there's a better system," he would smile at me the way you smile at a child who says something cute. "Leave the business to the business people, Maya." That was his line, every time. Leave the business to the business people. I was 22 when I graduated from college with a degree in business management. My father threw a dinner for Daniel's promotion that same month. I'm not sure he remembered my graduation until I mentioned it. I spent 2 years working at a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago, learning everything I could about commercial property management, tenant retention, and operational systems. I was quiet about it. I kept my head down. I saved every dollar I could. And at 24, I started my own consulting firm. Just me, a laptop, and 3 small clients who were willing to take a chance on someone young. My father found out 3 weeks later. His response was simple. When it fails, come work for Daniel. He wasn't cruel about it. He never raised his voice. He never called me names. He just dismissed me. Consistently. Completely. With a calm certainty that was somehow more painful than if he had screamed. Because when someone screams at you, at least they feel something about you. My father's dismissal felt like being invisible. Working in the dark. For 3 years, I built my firm in complete silence. I did not talk about it at family dinners. I did not bring it up when my father asked what I was doing with my life. I simply answered vaguely, kept my face calm, and went home to work until midnight. My firm was called Meridian Property Consulting. We specialized in one very specific thing: helping commercial landlords stop losing money on vacant units by redesigning their tenant acquisition and retention systems. It sounds technical. It is technical. But at its core, what I was doing was taking buildings that were struggling to keep tenants and turning them into places that businesses actually wanted to be in. And it worked. By year 2, I had 14 clients. By year 3, I had 31. My revenue was growing faster than I had projected, and I had hired 3 full-time employees and 2 contractors. I was not rich yet, but I was building something real, and nobody in my family knew. Not because I was hiding it out of shame, but because I had made a decision early on that I would not ask my family for validation. I would not bring my work to my father hoping for approval. I would not measure my progress by whether or not he was proud. I would simply build, quietly, consistently, and let the results speak when they were ready to speak. That did not mean it was easy. There were nights, more than I can count, where I sat alone in my small office and asked myself whether he was right, whether I was, in some fundamental way, not built for this, whether every setback was proof of what he had always believed about me. A major client dropped us in year 2, just like that, a phone call. We're going in a different direction. That was on a Thursday. I spent Friday crying. I spent the weekend rebuilding my pitch strategy. On Monday, I was back at the phone. That is what my father never saw. Not the failure, the response to it, the getting back up, the not quitting, the belief that the next call, the next meeting, the next proposal might be the one that changed everything. He never saw that because he never asked. And then came the morning that changed everything. Playing pretend. I was 27. My firm had just landed its largest client to date, a property management group that operated 8 mid-size commercial buildings across Illinois and Wisconsin. The contract was worth more in 1 year than my entire first 2 years of revenue combined. I had worked on that proposal for 6 months. 6 months of research, meetings, late nights, and revisions. I had flown to Wisconsin twice at my own expense just to walk the properties and understand the specific challenges. I had built a presentation so detailed and thorough that when I delivered it, the client's CEO looked at me and said, "Where have you been for the last 10 years?" The contract was signed on a Wednesday. On that Thursday morning, I came home to my parents' house because my mother had asked me to help her with something, and I stayed the night because it was late. I was sitting at the kitchen table at 6 a.m, exhausted and glowing all at once, with the proposal that had changed my life still in my bag. And my father walked in. Still playing pretend, I see. He didn't know what the papers were. He didn't ask. He saw his daughter looking tired at a kitchen table surrounded by documents, and he reached for the most familiar conclusion. Failure. And when he said what he said, about me not being built for business, about it being embarrassing, I sat there and I made a choice. I chose not to tell him about the contract. Not that morning, not that week, not for 11 years, because something shifted inside me in that moment. Something settled. A decision that felt less like anger and more like clarity. I thought, you will know when the building has my name on it, not before. I folded my papers, put them in my bag, and walked out. And I went to work. What growing in the dark looks like. What followed those 11 years is not a story of overnight success. It is a story of one small decision after another. One difficult year followed by a better one. One moment of doubt met with one more day of work. I want to tell you what those 11 years actually looked like, because so much of what people call revenge or success gets compressed into a highlight reel that makes it look easy. It was not easy. And you deserve to know the real story. Year 1 after that morning, I moved out of Chicago's rental market and reinvested every dollar I saved back into the firm. I hired my first real full-time employee, a woman named Patricia, who had 20 years of property management experience and who, for reasons I still don't fully understand, believed in me completely from day one. Patricia became my first partner. Year 3, we lost 2 major clients in the same quarter due to an economic slowdown. I had to make payroll from my personal savings for 4 months. I didn't sleep properly for most of that year, but we didn't lay anyone off. We restructured, reduced our overhead, and focused on the 3 clients we still had with laser precision. All 3 renewed. One referred us to a company that became our biggest client of that period. Year 5. Meridian Property Consulting officially became Meridian Property Group. We had expanded beyond consulting into actual property management services. 14 employees. Revenue that my 22-year-old self would not have believed. I still hadn't told my father. At family dinners during those years, my father would ask politely how my little business was going. I would say fine. He would nod with that familiar patient expression and move on to asking Daniel about the latest development his division was managing. Daniel, to his credit, was doing well. My father's company had grown under his management. He had made smart decisions, expanded the portfolio, and genuinely proved himself. I never resented Daniel for that. My issue was never with Daniel. My issue was with a man who had decided what I was worth before I had a chance to become it. Year 7. We made our first property acquisition. A small commercial building in Evanston that had been sitting at 40% occupancy for 3 years. We bought it, applied our own systems to it, and had it at 91% occupancy within 18 months. Then we sold it for nearly double what we paid. That was the moment I understood what we were really capable of. Year 8. We acquired 3 more properties. Patricia and I brought in 2 more partners, both of them women who had been dismissed in their previous careers the same way I had been dismissed. There was something about that shared experience that made us work well together. We didn't need to explain certain things to each other. We already understood. Year 9, Meridian Property Group was managing over $200 million in commercial real estate assets. We had offices in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Indianapolis. We had 43 employees. I still hadn't told my father, not because I was waiting for permission, not because I was afraid, but because I had made a promise to myself, standing in that kitchen at 27 with tired eyes and a contract in my bag. The building first. Then he would know. Year 10. We began planning the acquisition of a downtown Chicago commercial tower, a 40-story building that had been mismanaged for years and was trading at a significant discount because the previous ownership had not been able to stabilize occupancy. It was the largest acquisition Meridian had ever attempted. It took 14 months to close, but we closed it. And then, for almost a year, we renovated, restabilized, and relaunched that building. And on the day the new signage went up, on the day workers attached 40-inch steel letters spelling out Meridian Chen Tower to the front of a 40-story building in downtown Chicago, I picked up my phone and called my mother. I said, "Mom, I need Dad to meet me downtown. Tell him it's important." She asked if everything was okay. I said, "Everything is perfect." 11 years in one morning. I want to tell you what the night before felt like, because I think people imagine that moments like this are triumphant from the start, that you wake up feeling powerful and invincible, that revenge, when it finally arrives, feels like fireworks. That is not what it felt like. The night before I called my mother, I sat in my office on the 32nd floor of Meridian Chen Tower, my office, in my building, and I looked out at the Chicago skyline for a long time. I thought about that kitchen. I thought about the expression on my father's face. Not cruel, just certain. The way a person looks when they are not really seeing you at all. They are seeing an idea they already formed a long time ago. And no matter what you do, no matter what you build or how hard you work, they keep seeing that same idea. I thought about all the dinners where I said fine instead of the truth. I thought about Patricia, who had believed in me before I had fully believed in myself. About my 3 partners, each of whom had their own version of this story. About the 43 people who worked for us and the hundreds of tenants whose businesses ran out of buildings we managed. I thought about the proposal that sat in my bag on that kitchen table. And I realized something. This moment, tomorrow morning on that sidewalk, was not really about my father at all. It was about me. It was about the 27-year-old woman who walked out of that kitchen and decided in that moment that she would build something undeniable. Not for him, for herself. Because she believed it was possible when nobody else did. The building was not revenge. The building was proof. Not proof to him, proof to her, to me. I sat in that office until midnight. Then I went home, slept 6 hours, put on my best coat, and drove downtown. My father was already waiting on the sidewalk when I arrived. Looking up. He was standing with my mother. She had not told him why they were there, just that Maya needed them downtown. My father was in his coat, hands in his pockets, looking mildly impatient the way he always did when he did not understand the purpose of something. I parked across the street deliberately. I wanted to see his face before he saw me. He was looking at the building. Not because he knew, just because it was there, 40 stories of steel and glass on a corner that my father, of all people, knew well. He had worked in commercial real estate his entire adult life. He knew buildings. He could read a building the way some people read faces. And even from across the street, I could see him looking at it differently than he would look at just any building. Because it was a good building. What we had done to it was visible. The exterior renovation, the new signage, the updated entrance. Even from the outside, you could feel that someone who knew what they were doing had put their hands on this property. Then I crossed the street. My mother saw me first and smiled the way mothers smile when they are both happy and nervous at once. My father turned. He said, "Maya, what is this? Why are we standing outside a building at 8 in the morning?" I didn't answer yet. I walked to stand beside him, facing the building, and I looked up. "Read it," I said. He frowned. "Read what?" "The building," I said. "Read what it says." He looked up, and I watched his face. It took a moment. The letters were high up, 4th floor level, where the building's identity signage sat. Meridian Chen Tower. 4-foot steel letters, brushed silver, mounted against dark stone. I watched him read it. I watched him stop. I watched him read it again. He was quiet for a long time. My mother had known for about 3 weeks. I had told her privately, the way I always did. My mother was never the problem. She had cried when I told her. Happy tears. She had held my face in her hands and said, "I always knew." But she stood quietly now, letting this moment be what it needed to be. My father turned to look at me. His face was not what I expected. I had imagined many versions of this moment over the years. Sometimes I imagined him being proud. Sometimes I imagined him being defensive. Sometimes I imagined him simply not understanding. But what I saw on his face was something I had not prepared for. He looked lost, not in a confused way, in a man who has just realized something way. The expression of someone who has been walking through a room for years and suddenly notices a door they missed. He said, "This is yours?" "This is mine," I said. "Ours, my company's. We acquired it 14 months ago. We spent 11 months renovating and restabilizing. We have it at 88% occupancy now. The building has 40 floors. We manage the property and lease the commercial units. Our company has offices on floors 30 through 33. I said it simply, factually, the way you report business results. He was quiet. Meridian, he said slowly. You named it Meridian. Meridian Property Group. We've been operating for 11 years. Another silence. 11 years, he repeated. Yes. He looked back at the building. At those letters. Meridian Chen Tower. My last name. Our last name. On a 40-story building in downtown Chicago. And then my father, the man who had never once in my memory cried in front of me, pressed his lips together very hard. He did not cry, but it was close. He said, Maya, how large is... He stopped, started again. What is the company worth? I told him. He was silent for so long that my mother gently put her hand on his arm. Finally, he said, And you built this. You built all of this. Yes, I said. Without... He stopped. Without help, I finished for him. Yes. What he said next. We stood on that sidewalk for almost 20 minutes. Cars passed. People walked by with coffee cups and headphones. The city moved around us the way it always does. Indifferent, continuous, unbothered. My mother had stepped back slightly. She understood that what was happening between me and my father needed space. He asked me questions. Careful, quiet questions. How many employees? Which cities? What the acquisition process had looked like? Whether I had partners? I answered all of them the same way. Simply, clearly, without embellishment. At some point, he said, Daniel doesn't know either? No one in the family knew, except Mom, 3 weeks ago. Why? I thought about how to answer that. I had thought about it for 11 years, actually, how to say it in a way that was honest without being a weapon. Because I needed to build it without anyone's opinion of whether I could, I said, including yours. He flinched. It was small, but I saw it. Maya, he said. And then he stopped. And what happened next is something I did not expect. He said, I was wrong. Not, I'm sorry you felt that way. Not, I didn't mean it like that. He said, I was wrong. About you. About what you were capable of. I dismissed you for years, and I had no right to do that. I did not respond immediately. Because here is something that nobody tells you about moments of justice. They are more complicated than you imagine. You spend years picturing the moment when the person who underestimated you finally sees the truth. And in your imagination, it feels clean. It feels like a door slamming shut on all the pain. But standing there with my father on that sidewalk, watching him look at those letters with something broken in his expression, it did not feel clean. It felt heavy. Because he was not my villain. Not really. He was a man who had a limited idea of what I could be, and he had been careless with that limitation. He had caused real damage with his carelessness. But he was also my father. And seeing him diminished, even by truth, did not feel like winning. It felt like something more complicated than that. I said, I know you were. He nodded. I have been thinking about the things I said to you over the years, since your mother told me. 3 weeks of thinking about it. And I cannot explain to you how ashamed I am. I'm not here for an apology, I said. I didn't bring you here to shame you. Then why? I looked up at the building, at those letters. Because I made a promise to myself 11 years ago, and I wanted you to be here when I kept it, when Daniel found out. The fallout within the family happened gradually over the following 2 weeks. My father told Daniel himself. He called him the same afternoon and told him everything. I don't know exactly what was said in that conversation, only what Daniel told me later. He said. Dad called me and his voice sounded different, like he was smaller somehow. Daniel came to see me 3 days after the sidewalk. He came to my office in the tower, and I watched him take it in. The space, the view, the operation. Patricia was there, my partners were there. The ordinary machinery of a company that had been quietly building for over a decade. He sat across from me, and for a while he didn't say anything. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, thought about it honestly. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe not. In the early years, maybe not." "That's why," I said. He nodded slowly. "I followed Dad's lead with you, in how I talked to you, in how I thought about what you were doing." "I know. That wasn't fair." "No," I said. "It wasn't." There was a long silence. "Are you angry at me?" he asked. I thought about that. "I was," I said. "For a long time. Not as angry as I was at Dad, but yes. You had more information than he did, and you still dismissed me." "I'm sorry, Maya." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "Daniel, I don't want this to become a rift in the family. I didn't do this to destroy anyone. I did this because I had something to prove, to myself, not to any of you." "But we were wrong about you." "Yes, you were. And you just let us be wrong." "I let myself be right," I said. "That's different." He sat with that for a moment, and then slowly he smiled. A small, genuine smile. "You are something else, you know that?" "I've been told." He laughed. It was the first real laugh between us in a long time. Maybe the first real one ever. What the building meant beyond me. I want to tell you something about Meridian Property Group that I think matters beyond the personal story. When Patricia and I started expanding the company, we made a conscious decision about who we hired and how we operated. We hired people who had been overlooked. Women in their 30s and 40s who had spent years being told they were too old or too inexperienced for senior roles in commercial real estate. People who came from backgrounds that the industry traditionally ignored. Not out of charity, out of strategy. Because I knew from personal experience that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has been told they do not belong there and decided to prove that wrong. We had employees who had been laid off during corporate restructurings and came to us because they had nowhere else to go. They became some of our most loyal, most capable team members. We had a woman who had spent 15 years as an administrative assistant at a real estate firm, never promoted once, despite knowing more about operations than most of the managers above her. She came to us. Within 2 years, she was running our Indianapolis office. The building was not just mine. In a real way, it belonged to every person who had ever been told they were not enough and decided to keep going anyway. That is what I thought about on the morning after I stood with my father on the sidewalk. Not the victory, not the expression on his face, but the 43 people who had helped build what he was looking at. They were the building too. What my father said, 6 weeks later. 6 weeks after the sidewalk morning, my father asked me to have lunch with him. Just the two of us. No mother, no Daniel, no family buffer. We went to a quiet restaurant near his office, a place we had been to together many times over the years, usually for awkward obligation lunches that never went anywhere real. This time was different. He ordered his food, folded his hands on the table, and said, "I want to understand something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay," I said. "What did my words do to you? The things I said over the years, what did they actually do?" I looked at him. It was such a direct question, so unlike him. My father had always been the kind of man who moved around uncomfortable things rather than looking directly at them. And here he was, looking directly at it. I thought about how to answer honestly. They made me doubt myself in the quiet moments, I said. Not the big moments. I could push through those. But at 2 in the morning when something wasn't working, your voice was in my head, saying I wasn't built for it. And I had to fight that every single time. He was very still. I'm telling you this not to hurt you, I said, but because you asked for honesty. I know, he said. Keep going. They also made me stronger, I said, in a way that I did not choose and would not have chosen. I would have rather had your belief in me than your doubt. I would have rather built the company with your support than in spite of your dismissal. That version of the story would have been better for both of us. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I thought I was being realistic, protecting you from disappointment. I know, I said. That's the saddest part. You thought you were being a good father. He looked like I had said something that cut to the center of him, because I think I had. Was there a version of me, he asked slowly, that you ever got to have? The father you needed? I thought about that. Not enough of one, I said. But maybe we have time to fix that, if you want to. He looked up. I want to, he said. What happened after? I want to tell you where things stand now. Meridian Property Group is still growing. We made 2 more acquisitions in the 14 months following the tower. We are now managing assets across 5 states. Patricia was named co-CEO earlier this year in a formal restructuring that she deserved a long time before I finally made it official. My father and I have lunch every 3 weeks. He asks real questions now. About the business, about my decisions, about the industry. Sometimes he has useful things to say. He spent 40 years in commercial real estate, and that knowledge is real, whatever else was complicated between us. I listen to him differently now. Not because I need his approval, but because I am not carrying the weight of his disapproval anymore either. It is lighter. That is the only word for it. The relationship is lighter. Daniel and I are closer than we have ever been. He admitted to me, around month 3 after everything came out, that watching what I had built made him rethink certain assumptions he had about himself and what was possible. He has started working on something of his own, outside of my father's company, in a direction entirely his. I am not going to tell you what it is, because that is his story to tell. But I will tell you that I am proud of him. My mother said something to me recently that I have been thinking about ever since. She said, "You know what the real victory was? Not the building. The building was just the building. The real victory was that you never became bitter. You stayed soft enough to still love us when it was time to show us who you were." I think she was right. Bitterness would have been easy. God knows I had enough material for it. But bitterness would have cost me everything that mattered. It would have cost me the clarity I needed to build. It would have cost me the lightness I feel now. The building has my name on it. But so does everything that came after. What I want you to hear. If you are listening to this story and you are somewhere in the middle of yours, somewhere in the years between the dismissal and the building, I want to say something to you directly. Not as inspiration, not as motivation speech, just as someone who lived it. The people who dismiss you are usually not your enemies. They are usually people who are working from a limited idea of what is possible. And their limitation is not your ceiling. Their ceiling is theirs. Yours is completely separate. The most important decision I made was not the acquisition of a building. It was not the contract that launched my company, or the hire that changed our direction, or the partnership that gave us the capital to grow. The most important decision I made was on a Thursday morning at 27 years old, sitting at a kitchen table with a proposal in my bag and a father who could not see me. I decided not to be stopped by what he could not see. That's it. That's the whole strategy. Not revenge, not proving him wrong, not waiting for the moment he finally understood. Just, I decided not to be stopped. What happens after that? The growth, the building, the sidewalk moment. That is all just the natural result of that one decision made over and over again. Every morning, through every setback, through every night where the doubt crept in, And the voice said maybe he was right. No. Keep going. That is the whole story. That is the building. Some people will never be ready to believe in you until you have already built the thing. That is sad for them. But it does not have to stop you. The building was always yours. You just had to build it first.